It's a big step and all that. So I thought it was ironic because a few months earlier,
One of the things he wants to talk about is Starfleet.
Is Star Trek.
Yeah.
In what is being called the most devastating and historic interview in Star Trek's nearly 60-year history, William Shatner and Patrick Stewart, the two actors who define what it means to be a Starfleet captain, sat down together for an explosive joint interview where they absolutely annihilated Starfleet Academy, eviscerated Paramount's leadership, and declared that the franchise they spent their lives building has been destroyed by incompetence, political correctness, and complete disregard for quality. And according to people who've seen advance excerpts from the interview, which is being published by a major entertainment outlet, Shatner and Stewart didn't just criticize, they delivered a comprehensive, methodical, and utterly damning indictment that leaves no room for Paramount to defend itself or spin the disaster. This is absolutely earth-shattering because William Shatner and Patrick Stewart represent the entire heart and soul of Star Trek. Shatner is the original series, the foundation upon which everything was built. Stewart is The Next Generation, the show that proved Star Trek could continue and evolve while maintaining its core values. Together, these two men embody 6 decades of Star Trek history. And when they speak with one unified voice to say that Paramount has destroyed the franchise, that's not opinion. That's historical record from the people who have the most authority to make that judgment. The fact that these two legends chose to do this interview together rather than separately is strategically brilliant and symbolically powerful. Shatner at 93 and Stewart at 85 could have each stayed quiet, protected their legacies, and avoided controversy. Instead, they've joined forces to deliver what sources describe as the most brutally honest, profanity-laced, and uncompromising interview either has ever given. They're burning every bridge with Paramount, risking backlash, and putting their reputations on the line because they believe Star Trek is worth fighting for, even if that fight destroys their relationship with the studio. Let's break down what William Shatner and Patrick Stewart allegedly said in this explosive interview, the specific ways they destroyed Starfleet Academy and modern Star Trek, why they decided this confrontation was necessary, and what this means for any remaining possibility that the franchise can survive. According to sources who've seen portions of the interview, it opens with an explanation of how Shatner and Stewart came to do this conversation together. Stewart allegedly begins, "Bill and I have known each other for decades. We've been ambassadors for Star Trek through different eras, different series, different approaches to the franchise. But over the past several years, we've found ourselves in increasingly frequent contact about our shared concerns, our shared horror, really, about what's happened to Star Trek under Paramount's leadership." Shatner reportedly adds, "Patrick and I don't agree on everything. We have different political views in some areas, but we absolutely agree that Starfleet Academy and the broader direction of modern Star Trek represent a betrayal of everything Gene Roddenberry created and everything we worked to build. We're doing this interview together because fans need to hear from the original Captain Kirk and from Captain Picard that what's being done to Star Trek is wrong, it's destructive, and it needs to stop." The symbolism of this joint appearance cannot be overstated. For nearly 60 years, Star Trek fans have debated Kirk versus Picard, comparing the two captains and their approaches to leadership and problem-solving. But now Kirk and Picard, Shatner and Stewart, are united in their criticism of Paramount, presenting a unified front that transcends any historical debates about which captain or which series was better. When these two men agree on something Star Trek-related, that carries more weight than anything any studio, executive, or modern showrunner could say. The interview apparently turns quickly to Starfleet Academy, and both actors demonstrate that they didn't just casually watch a few episodes. They studied the show carefully and came prepared with specific, detailed criticisms that show deep engagement with the material. Shatner allegedly begins the Starfleet Academy critique with characteristic bluntness. "I watched Starfleet Academy because I needed to understand exactly what Paramount was doing to the franchise I helped create. What I saw horrified me. It was the worst television I've seen in my 70-plus years in the entertainment industry. The writing was amateurish, the acting was mediocre at best. The production values were surprisingly cheap despite clearly having a substantial budget. But worst of all, it wasn't Star Trek. It was a political lecture disguised as Star Trek, and a boring, preachy, poorly executed lecture at that. Stewart reportedly adds, "I had a similar experience watching the show. I went in hoping to find something to appreciate, some kernel of the Star Trek I love, but every episode made me angrier and more depressed. This was a show made by people who either don't understand Star Trek or who actively disdain what Star Trek represents. Every creative choice seemed designed to subvert or lecture rather than to inspire or entertain." Both actors apparently spend significant time dissecting the show's writing problems with the precision of experienced performers who understand dramatic structure and character development. Shatner allegedly says, "The dialogue in Starfleet Academy would have been rejected from any competent television show. Characters speak in exposition constantly. They explain their feelings rather than showing them through action. They deliver monologues that sound like they were written by political activists rather than by writers who understand how human beings actually talk." Stewart reportedly provides specific examples. There's a scene in the 4th episode where a character gives a speech about discrimination that goes on for nearly 3 minutes. It stops the episode completely. There's no dramatic tension, no conflict, no reason for the speech except to deliver a message to the audience. That's not drama. That's a public service announcement, and it's emblematic of the entire show's approach to storytelling. The discussion of character development is apparently particularly scathing. Shatner allegedly says, "Characters in Starfleet Academy don't exist as people. They exist as representatives of identity categories. You have the black character who exists to talk about racism. You have the LGBTQ character who exists to discuss sexuality and gender. You have the character from a marginalized background who exists to explain oppression. These aren't characters, they're political statements with names attached." Stewart reportedly contrasts this with how the next generation approached diverse characters. When we introduced Geordi LaForge, he was a blind black man who became chief engineer. His blindness was part of who he was. He used his visor to see, and occasionally episodes dealt with challenges related to his disability. But Geordi was defined by his competence, his friendship with Data, his humor, his unrequited romantic interests, his engineering brilliance. His blindness and race were aspects of his character, not his entire identity. That's good representation, showing diverse characters as fully realized people. Starfleet Academy does the opposite. Both actors apparently address the diversity and representation controversy directly and at length, knowing this is the most politically charged aspect of the criticism. Stewart, with his decades of progressive advocacy, reportedly says, "I want to be absolutely crystal clear about something. I am not opposed to diversity in Star Trek. I am not opposed to representation. I have fought for LGBTQ rights, racial equality, and inclusion my entire career. What I oppose is bad diversity. Tokenism, political correctness, and representation done so poorly that it undermines its own goals and insults both the people being represented and the audience being lectured." Shatner allegedly adds, "Star Trek was diverse in the 1960s when it actually cost something to show a multiracial crew working together as equals. We had Uhura on the bridge at a time when that was revolutionary. We had Sulu and Chekhov representing Asian and Russian characters when those were controversial choices. But our diversity was integrated into the storytelling. It wasn't the story itself. We showed a future where diversity was normal and unremarkable, which was powerful precisely because we didn't constantly draw attention to it." Stewart reportedly continues, "Starfleet Academy's approach to diversity is actually regressive. By making every diverse character's identity their defining characteristic, by having them constantly discuss their marginalization and oppression, the show is reinforcing difference and division rather than showing unity and integration. That's the opposite of what Star Trek should do." The political messaging issue apparently generates some of the harshest criticism from both actors. Shatner allegedly says, "Gene Roddenberry had political views, yes. He was progressive for his time. But he understood that science fiction works best as allegory. You use futuristic scenarios and alien civilizations to explore contemporary issues in ways that make audiences think, rather than react defensively. Starfleet Academy abandons allegory completely and just transplants 2025 political discourse into a Star Trek setting. That's lazy, it's ineffective, and it's not Star Trek. Stewart reportedly adds specific analysis. The original series dealt with the Cold War through episodes about the Federation and Klingons finding ways to cooperate despite ideological differences. The next generation dealt with cultural relativism and colonialism through the Prime Directive and encounters with pre-warp civilizations. Deep Space Nine dealt with terrorism and religious extremism through the Bajoran occupation and the conflict with Cardassia. These were sophisticated, nuanced explorations of complex issues that respected the audience's intelligence. Starfleet Academy just has characters giving speeches about contemporary political issues. There's no allegory, no subtlety, no sophistication. Both actors apparently discuss the woke controversy explicitly, with Stewart taking the lead. He allegedly says, "The term woke has become weaponized and controversial, but I'm going to use it because it accurately describes what's wrong with Starfleet Academy. The show is woke in the worst sense. It prioritizes political correctness, identity politics, and contemporary social justice messaging over quality storytelling, character development, and respecting the source material. When you make those political priorities more important than making good television, you create content that alienates audiences and fails both artistically and commercially." Shatner reportedly agrees. "I'm 93 years old. I've seen a lot of political movements and cultural trends come and go. What's happening with Starfleet Academy and modern Star Trek reminds me of propaganda. Not in the sense of government control, but in the sense of art being subordinated to political messaging. When politics becomes more important than art, you get bad art that doesn't even effectively communicate the political messages because audiences tune out." The interview apparently includes both actors discussing their attempts to influence Paramount before giving up. Stewart allegedly reveals, "I had multiple meetings with Paramount executives over the past few years expressing concerns about Star Trek's direction. I watched Discovery and had serious problems with the writing and approach. Participated in Picard despite reservations because I hoped I could bring some of the next generation's sensibility to the show. But I was constantly fighting against producers who wanted something darker, more cynical, more politically overt than what I thought Picard and Star Trek should be." Stewart reportedly continues, "After Picard ended, I told Paramount that I would consult on future projects if they wanted guidance on how to make Star Trek that honored the franchise's legacy. They thanked me but never followed up. Then Starfleet Academy premiered, and I realized they had no interest in my input or in the input of anyone who actually understands Star Trek. That's when I decided to walk away completely." Shatner allegedly shares similar experiences. "I've reached out to Paramount multiple times over the years, offering to help with Star Trek projects. I have ideas. I have experience. I understand what made Star Trek successful. But they don't want input from the old guard. They want to make their version of Star Trek without interference from people who know better. That arrogance has destroyed the franchise." Both actors apparently discuss the fan response to Starfleet Academy and Paramount's treatment of critics. Shatner allegedly says, "Paramount's strategy has been to dismiss all criticism of Starfleet Academy and modern Trek as coming from toxic fans, racists, and sexists. That's offensive and dishonest. I've read thousands of fan comments. The overwhelming majority are intelligent, substantive criticisms about writing quality, character development, and creative choices. These are people who love Star Trek and are heartbroken about what's been done to it. Calling them toxic or bigoted is insulting and allows Paramount to avoid accountability." Stewart reportedly adds, "I've met Star Trek fans all over the world for decades. They're intelligent, thoughtful, passionate people who care deeply about the franchise. When those fans tell you that Starfleet Academy isn't good Star Trek, you should listen to them. They're your audience. They're the people who've sustained this franchise for 60 years. Dismissing them because they don't like your political messaging is suicidal for the franchise's future." The financial and business critique apparently comes from both actors as well. Shatner allegedly says, "Star Trek should be a goldmine for Paramount. It has a massive global fan base, decades of goodwill, enormous cultural significance. The fact that Paramount has managed to make Star Trek controversial, divisive, and financially underperforming is remarkable incompetence. They've destroyed value through bad creative decisions and bad management." Stewart reportedly adds, "I've been part of franchises that were managed well and franchises that were managed poorly. The Next Generation was managed well. The studio gave us resources, respected the creative team, and built something that lasted. Starfleet Academy represents everything wrong with modern franchise management. Prioritizing short-term political goals over long-term brand health, hiring based on ideology rather than competence, and refusing to learn from failure." The most explosive part of the interview allegedly comes when both actors are asked whether Star Trek can be saved. Shatner reportedly says, "Not under current Paramount leadership. The people running Star Trek don't understand it, don't respect it, and are using it as a vehicle for their political agendas. Until those people are removed and replaced with individuals who actually love Star Trek and want to make quality entertainment, the franchise is doomed." Stewart allegedly agrees emphatically. Bill is absolutely right. Starfleet Academy wasn't an isolated failure. It's the logical culmination of years of bad creative decisions and ideological capture. Saving Star Trek requires complete regime change at Paramount, new creative leadership with different priorities, and a commitment to returning to what made Star Trek special. Without that, there's no hope. Both actors apparently address the legacy question, how they want to be remembered in relation to Star Trek. Shatner allegedly says, "I created Captain Kirk nearly 60 years ago. That character and that show changed my life and touched millions of people around the world. I will not allow my legacy and Kirk's legacy to be tarnished by association with what Paramount has done to Star Trek. That's why Patrick and I are speaking out, to make clear that we are not responsible for this disaster and that we oppose what's being done to the franchise we love." Stewart reportedly adds, "Playing Captain Picard was the honor of my career. The Next Generation represented Star Trek at its best. Thoughtful, optimistic, diverse, intelligent. I will not quietly watch as Paramount destroys that legacy with shows like Starfleet Academy. Future generations need to know that the people who made Star Trek great fought against what was done to it. This interview is our testimony." The interview apparently concludes with both actors making direct appeals to Paramount and to Star Trek fans. Shatner allegedly says, "To Paramount, you've destroyed Star Trek. You know it, we know it, the fans know it. You can continue down this path and watch the franchise die completely, or you can make fundamental changes and try to salvage something. The choice is yours, but time is running out." Stewart reportedly adds, "To Star Trek fans, Patrick and I stand with you. We hear your frustration and your heartbreak about what's been done to Star Trek. We validate your criticisms of Starfleet Academy and modern Trek. You are not toxic or bigoted for demanding better. You're loyal fans who deserve quality Star Trek that honors the franchise's legacy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The final words allegedly come from both actors together in a statement they reportedly crafted jointly. "We are Captain Kirk and Captain Picard. We are Star Trek, and we are telling you that Starfleet Academy was an abomination, that modern Star Trek has betrayed Gene Roddenberry's vision, and that Paramount has failed in its stewardship of this beloved franchise. We will not be silent. We will not be diplomatic. We will tell the truth, and history will record that when Star Trek was being destroyed, the captains who commanded the Enterprise stood up and fought back." The reaction to this interview, once published, is going to be absolutely cataclysmic. This isn't just another celebrity complaint or typical Hollywood drama. This is William Shatner and Patrick Stewart, 94 and 85 years old respectively, with nothing to prove and nothing to lose, delivering a comprehensive, unified, devastating critique of Paramount's Star Trek that will be impossible to dismiss or spin. Star Trek fans are going to treat this interview as Holy Writ, the definitive explanation from the franchise's greatest legends about what went wrong and who's responsible. The interview will be quoted endlessly, referenced in every discussion about Starfleet Academy and modern Trek, and treated as historical testimony about Paramount's failure. Paramount faces an impossible situation. How do you respond when Captain Kirk and Captain Picard jointly say you destroyed Star Trek? You can't attack them without looking monstrous. You can't dismiss them without looking arrogant. You can't defend Starfleet Academy when the two greatest Star Trek actors ever have systematically dismantled it. There's no good move. The entertainment industry will view this as a historic moment. Two legendary actors from different eras of a massive franchise uniting to expose catastrophic mismanagement. This will be studied for decades as an example of how not to handle beloved intellectual property and how alienating your most important advocates destroys franchise value. For Starfleet Academy, this interview is the final verdict. The show will forever be remembered as so terrible, so misguided, and so destructive that it drove William Shatner and Patrick Stewart to team up and publicly destroy it. That's a legacy no show wants, but it's the legacy Starfleet Academy has earned. The William Shatner and Patrick Stewart interview about Starfleet Academy is the moment when Star Trek's greatest legends said enough is enough and told the world exactly what happened to the franchise they loved. It's a historical document, a scathing indictment, and a eulogy for what Star Trek was before Paramount destroyed it. And it's a testament to the courage of two men who loved Star Trek enough to risk everything to defend it, even when that meant declaring war on the studio that should have treasured them most. Captain Kirk and Captain Picard have spoken. Paramount has been judged. And Star Trek's fate now rests on whether anyone in power has the wisdom to listen to the two men who know the franchise better than anyone alive.